Welcome to Ellevate Louisiana's Engage Videocast. Ellevate Louisiana was founded in 2020 to empower women leaders throughout Louisiana by connecting and educating them on the challenges impacting our state with data-driven, nonpartisan solutions to make a better future for Louisiana. Hello, I'm your host, Julie Stokes. Today, we are recording our next episode in a series on Louisiana's workforce and economy. Our guest joining us today is Michael Williamson, President and CEO of the United Way of Southeast Louisiana, which serves Jefferson, Orleans, Plaquemines, St. Bernard, St. Tammany, Tangipahoa, and Washington parishes. Michael has over 30 years of executive-level nonprofit management experience. 26 of those years are served in the United Way system, and we're excited to talk to him today. He's got a great wealth of knowledge about what we're going to speak about today, which is the isALICE project. And first, I'd just like to welcome you, Michael.
Well, thanks for having me, Julie. You just reminded me how old I am. 30 years in the network, so.
We like to do that around here. we don't want to be alone in it.
Yeah.
So first, for those of our listeners and watchers out there that don't know what the isALICE project is, what is it and what does it research?
Absolutely. So first I'll say it's a collaborative effort in the state of Louisiana among all 12 United Ways in the state of Louisiana. And isALICE is an acronym for Asset Limited, Income Constrained, Employed. And essentially it's a study of financial hardship. And it started with the premise that the traditional measures of poverty and financial hardship just are antiquated and they don't work today. It doesn't fully recognize the scope and scale of families that struggle day to day, oftentimes above the poverty level, but still not earning enough to make ends meet. And you know as well as I do that there are a lot of families out there that find themselves in that position. So this is a report that studies that, and I like to consider the Cliff Notes on financial hardship. It's very easy to understand, very easy to read. It's not kind of heavy research kind of talk. So it's an excellent report. We're proud to be a part of it.
So, who's in this isALICE population? I mean, what does this set of people in our state look like? Or, obviously it's not just in our state, but in Louisiana, what does it look like?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this report's been done in 20 states across the U.S. so far, and more states continue to pick it up and produce their own reports. But isALICE households and isALICE individuals are people that we know. It could be a family member, a neighbor, etc. But these are hardworking Louisiana citizens. They may be cashiers in a grocery store, a convenience store. They may work in the healthcare industry, etc. But they're not earning enough to meet kind of the basic needs that they need to supply for themselves and their families. So these aren't strangers. And in fact, I can guarantee everyone that more than once a day, you are running by, interacting with somebody that we would consider isALICE, and you might not know the full scale and scope of the challenges they face.
Yeah. So what's the income threshold for an isALICE family?
So for the individual, I'll make sure I look at my numbers right here. So for an individual, it's about $24,000 per year. And you think about the number of kind of low-wage jobs that typically dominate our economy. There's a lot of jobs out there where the individual might make somewhere less than $24,000 a year. And then for a family of four, it's about $69,000 a year. So, I mean, these are wages that aren't sufficient to meet the basic survival budget. Pay for things like housing and transportation and childcare, which is something that's extremely important to our organization because we understand the importance of access to childcare. But those things are expensive. Housing is expensive, transportation is expensive, childcare, healthcare. And so these individuals at those income levels are barely scraping by and oftentimes having to make serious sacrifices.
So if we're talking about an individual here, that's the 24,000, correct?
Mm-hmm. Right.
Okay, so at $24,000 a year, that means I'm making $10, $11 an hour? What?
Yeah, give or take. And then you figure on the housing, so you kind of put that into perspective. So my gross income maybe if it's around $2,000 a month, and all of a sudden you have to kind of lop off the top, and it's actually pre-tax. So you think about after taxes, what a person might be left with. And then you're paying anywhere from $600 to $900 per month for a home. And then you've got healthcare costs and childcare costs. if you're able to get some of it subsidized, maybe, but maybe not. And so next thing you know, that less than $2,000 that you're bringing home has been cut into leaving you about a third, maybe at best. So it's and it's on one hand, the report can be somewhat startling because 1 in 2 households in Southeast Louisiana in particular find themselves in this particular position. But the report is very informative. It does give us a sense of what does it take to be able to help a family afford and meet their basic needs. And I think especially for employers who care very much about their employees, this now gives them a target to shoot for, to think about how do we make sure that our employees are earning enough to be able to support their families.
Well, one of the first things I think of, first of all, $10, $11 an hour, maybe $11.50. I'd have to do the math.
Right.
And the minimum wage is $7.25, right?
Right. So yeah.
So can anybody work for $7.25 an hour, 40 hours a week, and survive? Is that possible?
Clearly no. And I know there's a lot of discussions out there around the minimum wage and what is it, what should it be? We also, a lot of folks think that these jobs may be entry-level jobs, but oftentimes they're not. Oftentimes a person, that is the job that they can perform, the job that they have access to. So that's what they're doing to try to earn a living. We prefer to shift the conversation from minimum to what is a livable wage. This is a very different conversation, and it's not to put the complete onus on the employers and business and industry and the folks that kind of have those occupations, but it does set a different tone because it means now we have to understand what does it take for our employees to actually meet their basic needs, because oftentimes if you see issues around performance or employees that may struggle, it's oftentimes because they're stressed because of their financial situation. Oftentimes, if they're making $7.25 at one job, they probably got another job making $7.25 somewhere else. And so they're trying to string together enough income, but then they're exhausted, they're overworked, they're trying to take care of their families, which if you have children, that's a full-time job on top of 2 other full-time jobs. And so, but we prefer to think about it as a livable wage. I think that's it appeals more to the humanitarian side of the community.
Right. Because if $10 an hour for an individual is barely livable, then it really makes us kind of question as a society, I think. And I mean, one of the things I think about too is the benefits cliff.
Yep.
I talked to Dr. Monty Sullivan about this, and I mean, the issue is that let's say that, just give one example. If I'm a single mom, I had a friend that I helped. I was assigned to help her, as part of our church ministry.
Right.
And I kind of took her under my wing because she was left by her husband and she had 3 little kids and she was 24 years old. They got married right out of high school. They had no guidance, none at all. But both sides of their family were just, not really people that could help guide them tremendously. So they got married right out of right out of high school, started having babies. So they did everything kind of the right way. He worked in a restaurant. She stayed home and took care of these kids, and he left her. And he left her high and dry.
Wow.
And she was able to get a job making $10 an hour. They would only employ her 30 hours a week or whatever the minimum was for benefits, so she couldn't make the full amount. And she could get government subsidized childcare. And she was able to get that fairly quickly, but I mean, she still had to pay $75 a month for each kid on the government subsidized health care.
Still a lot.
And she was able to get SNAP for her kids. She was able to get Medicaid for her kids, but there really wasn't much else. And I couldn't make it. I couldn't make ends meet for this girl. I mean, I just couldn't. She needed to buy a car. She was left without a car when he left her. I mean, it was just a train wreck. And these are people that, quote unquote, kind of did everything the right way by a lot of our standards. They got married, they had kids.
Sure. Well, no, it is what it is, right? People can do things the right way and still fall in financial hardship. And
that's right.
I think COVID-19, if anything, has shown us that you could be doing everything exactly right, and then the circumstances well beyond your control can throw you a curveball that you just simply cannot hit. And so I think, first of all, we just have to recognize that people end up in those situations for a variety of reasons. I think in particular, because you mentioned the benefits cliff, I think one of the things that's so important for us to get our arms around is the fact that, you know, the benefits cliff can be a disincentive for an individual to pursue higher wages if those higher wages won't afford them the same benefits they were getting when they were at a lower income. And the Federal Reserve Bank has done some amazing work in studying this. They're developing I think it's almost completed, if not completed, but they developed a calculator, a benefits cliff tool, if you will, to help kind of plan pathways to economic opportunity, help you figure out what do you got to do to be able to navigate, you know, the loss of benefits and at the same time when you're increasing your income. And so I think, you know, when you got to feed your family, when you want your children to be well cared for and you want to take care of your family, and you know, public benefits are the only way because of the limited income you have, and that's what you're going to do. You know, basic human instinct is you're going to do what you got to do to take care of your family. But I do think it's something that we, not just as a community here in Southeast Louisiana, but we as a nation have to come to grips with and find a better way so that there's more incentive for families to be able to earn more resources. And then two, for the employers, I think it's also how do we help develop our employees so that investing more in them through their wages actually produces a return for the business, because that's why businesses operate. I think I like to say there's not an either or, there's a both and solution.
There's a both and. I agree. Okay, so what are some of the major trends from the latest release of the LouisianaALICE report?
We started the report in 2016, and we're on our third rendition of the report. But what we've seen is, you know, massive increases in cost of living, you know, upwards of 30% or so, I think, you know, depending on the year. Yet wages haven't grown that fast. And so things like childcare have gone up tremendously. You know, those types of costs, housing costs don't go down. We know if we live in Southeast Louisiana, if you live in a metropolitan area, you see the cost of housing is significant. So at the same time that the cost of living increases, and we all experience it, but we find ways to absorb it. You know, we just have to budget differently and cut back here and there, but at least we can. And so that's a trend we've seen across all the categories. These costs go up, wages don't nearly keep pace. Inflation certainly suppresses, you know, a person's, discretionary, ability to go out and buy things and pay for things for their family. So, and that's been a trend that's held true since we started the report. And so, and we don't anticipate that changing. And so we have to find a way to, at the same time, help wages grow, both through addressing what is needed as a livable wage and providing individuals with the skills and tools they need to earn greater wages. And then also, you know, a lot of work we're doing here at United Way through our J. Wayne Leonard Prosperity Center is teaching people how to manage their income and how to live on incomes that are limited. Because, you know, you still have to manage your money effectively.
Yeah. Well, and so that just hit home for me, you know, because I'm a first generation college graduate. And, you know, my mother had a high school diploma, but my father did not. And, you know, they raised me and held together a nice household on what my dad was able to make. He was an operating engineer, and my mom stayed home to raise me. Right. And the very little amount of money, I mean, I can't say enough. Still to this day, you know, my father passed away a long time ago, but my mom, I learned from her the art of managing money, because that woman can live on so little and live in a way that nobody looks at her and thinks, oh, you know, she doesn't have much. I mean, she's always well put together. She's got a good enough car. You know, she's not going to do things like go on vacations and, you know, anything that's not completely necessary.
Well, she could teach classes in our Prosperity Center, because part of that, even as a person, as their income grows, learning how to manage it effectively so that you can, you know, issues around kind of asset wealth and asset independence, being able to purchase a home and a car and acquire assets that'll help you live a fruitful and prosperous life, but also save for the rainy day or a pandemic, if you will, and then also prepare for your future. So when you're ready to retire, you can actually do that and then enjoy being retired. And so those are skills that that often haven't been taught in families, certainly not taught in a lot of schools, but are
Yeah.
so necessary. And we've seen tremendous success in helping individuals acquire not just economic, opportunity, jobs, but at the same time giving them the skills they need to be able to manage that income. And we've just seen amazing success, life changing. Actually, it changes generations to come because they're learning and sharing the skills they learned through our Prosperity Center.
Yeah, well, that's really good and very important stuff. I want to talk a little bit about, you said about saving for a rainy day, and it reminds me of the rainy day fund with the state, but we're not talking about that right now. Think about Alice households, and I think about the family I mentioned earlier, and he worked in a restaurant. I mean, what does that look like? I mean, for people that are living paycheck to paycheck, what the heck's happened now?
Well, we launched our Hospitality Cares Pandemic Response Fund, raised over $2.4 million, and provided 4,800 hospitality workers with a $500 check just to help out. And that was a lot. It was significant. It actually was occurring even before federal assistance could become available because we could just move faster. But all that said and done, it only buys you a few weeks or a month, maybe, when rent is due and you're trying to make sure that you're able to take care of your family. And lots of programs were activated around the community, feeding programs, et cetera, to try to help support folks. But if you don't have the $400 or $500 in the bank, should be more, really. We often talk about 3 months worth of your income stashed away in a bank so that if you lost employment for an extended period of time, you could make it through. Well, if you don't have that, which many people don't, I mean, even studies nationally show that the majority of people don't have $400 in a savings account to be able to kind of meet a rainy day type of requirement, then you have to turn to the community. And then the community can only do so much. Fortunately, we have the faith community, that can step up, and the nonprofit community, and government's going to do its part. But it's just such a massive issue, especially around COVID, when, tens of thousands of hospitality workers, just hospitality workers, let alone thinking about retail establishments, et cetera, closed. And so, fortunately, many of us took advantage of the payroll protection program and other things that are out there that could help. And the government certainly came through and offered some assistance as well. And we're on round 2 of that. But still, that's not long term. And to be able to weather these types of circumstances long term, the answer is simple: ensuring everybody has access to economic opportunity, they'll pay good wages, make sure they have the tools and skills they need to manage those resources, and save for a more extended crisis if it ever happens again.
Well, and just right around the time that this will release, we'll also have a podcast that'll release with Secretary Dejoie from Workforce Commission, and we talked about the fact that 278,000 people lost employment during COVID, and that was the single biggest loss of employment in Louisiana's history. The next closest one would think might be Katrina, but I think you had so much rebuilding going on, it sort of mitigated that. It was still very high.
Sure.
But the biggest one, and I remember it well, was 1986 when the oil market in Louisiana collapsed. And I remember it well because my dad was a blue collar worker. He was an operating engineer, and construction stopped. I mean, there wasn't any money in Louisiana, and it was a severe crisis. And I can remember that particular year, how even though my dad and everybody in his field really made honestly less than $10,000 that whole year. I remember it well. And my mother, because she's that money manager, was able to save up enough to make it through that crisis. But that was very real. And it's something that impacts good people that want to work and want to do the right thing. And I think that's important to remember, because I think it's easy enough to get caught up in our little bubbles. Mm-hmm. And to think that's other kinds of people. That's other kinds of people that don't really want to do the right thing. That's other kinds of people that don't bother to get an education. But in all reality, it's people that a lot of times when people don't get an education, it's because they didn't have the opportunity. And you can't know every scenario that plays out in somebody's life. There are times when, because of the environment of their family or whatever, that opportunity is not really there. So that saving, and I love what you're saying about your prosperity center. That's
Mhm.
so important. That's how you make it through that drought.
Well, it's oftentimes I call it the bootstrap mentality that many
Yep.
folks out there. So you just got to pull yourself up by your bootstraps, right? Just you got to push through and weather the hard times. But when you're experiencing trauma and you don't have, if maybe education hasn't been prevalent in your family, you haven't seen what it looks like, you don't know what it's like to have things and what it, you just haven't experienced that, then it's like not having boots,
Yeah.
or it's like not having boots with straps. And
Right.
so our approach is, well, let's try to make sure we get people some boots, and maybe boots with straps. They have something to pull themselves up on, because I can tell you how powerful it is when an individual achieves economic stability, when they go to purchase that asset, when they go to buy that home, and the first time in their families, in their generation, they were able to do that, how empowering it is. It's a sense of pride. They want to work harder. Then they might want to work 2 or 3 jobs, but it's not because they have to. It's
Right.
because they want to, because they're trying to get ahead. And we've seen cases like that. We've seen
Yeah.
cases where on my feet, I'm going to take an extra shift. I'm going to work a little more because I want to buy this thing over here. And
Mm-hmm.
that's certainly refreshing for us to see, because it means that we're making a difference. But you got to give people the boots, and the boots got to have
Yeah.
straps. They got to have something to pull
Yeah.
them up with.
But I also want to say something that boots with straps. Now, we don't usually think through that analogy all that much, right? I mean,
Right.
nobody really does. And I never really did until actually my son was like, "You ever tried to pull yourself up by your bootstrap?" And
It's-
and and it would be akin to sitting on the floor and getting up without your hands touching the floor. So not everybody's got the abdominal muscles or the
yeah,
calf muscles or the,
you got to have that
so
core. Yeah.
yeah, you have to have that core. And so that's an issue. And I think that people need to realize is that not everybody's born with the same physical abilities. Not everybody's born with the same mental abilities. And it doesn't necessarily mean that you're, born by some definition of handicap or by some definition of special needs. It's just that everybody's created equal in this life and on this earth. And that sometimes even people that have boots and bootstraps, it's hard.
Okay,
Um,
absolutely. And I mean, I know I've heard many, many times in my life, life is hard. It's not always easy. It's not fair. Or, just a series of things that can explain why things don't always work out the way you want them to. And that may very well be true, but it doesn't mean we can't do what we can do as a community to ensure that everyone has access to a great life. And the reality is, and I think people have to really come to grips with the fact that it is so important, is when the whole community succeeds, we all succeed. I mean, our ALICE report shows that if we lifted the ALICE population out of their current circumstances, it would generate $54 billion a year more in GDP. And so you can't underestimate the fact that the economic impact of making sure that these ALICE households are lifted out of those circumstances, that they earn enough to meet their basic needs and can take care of their families, the economic ripple effect that it has in a positive way, which means businesses, I mean, customers, consumers can spend more money because they have more money to spend, which recycles back through the economy. And I know there's a fine line, but the stark reality is that, every year we go by with families living and struggling as ALICE is lost gross domestic product, which
yeah.
we know is clearly a good measure of how well we can do as a state.
Was that 54 billion in Louisiana alone, right?
Yes, yes.
Gee,
So
yeah,
think nationally.
yeah, yeah. It would be an extremely large number. So Michael, in the end, how has COVID-19 affected Alice households in Louisiana?
So, throughout our conversation, we've certainly talked about who ALICE is. So you can imagine ALICE was already struggling day to day, already facing financial hardship. And then a pandemic hits, and these individuals work in industries, the hospitality industry and retail and healthcare, et cetera, certain sectors where we saw lost employment. And so it dramatically affected ALICE households and actually, increased the number of households that found themselves in that position where their incomes
Mhm.
were completely cut off, and they didn't have enough income to meet their basic needs and were in desperate need of financial assistance. So not only exacerbated the issue for ALICE households that were already kind of teetering on the edge, but actually forced more people to join their ranks, which is extraordinarily unfortunate.
Mhm.
Um, but I'm also proud that there are organizations out there like ours and others that are trying to do our part to be a support system.
Yeah. So we also have had Secretary Ava Dejoie from the Louisiana Workforce Commission. And when she talked about the loss of jobs during COVID, it's the highest in Louisiana's history ever. And it was kind of ironic because the second highest drop in employment was a time that I remember a whole lot from my own childhood, basically, but that was 1986 during the oil crash in Louisiana. And at that point, it was just a few less jobs than were lost during COVID. And you know that my dad was a blue collar worker, and construction just it completely stopped. There were no jobs, and we were with a lot of families that year that made yeah $10,000 or less. I mean, it was extremely dire. And to your points that you speak about with the Alice Prosperity Center and all of that, it was strictly the ability of my mother's budgeting and making sure she had saved for that rainy day that got us through that. And I mean, it was of no fault of our own. You
Sure.
know, we're hardworking people. But it was a tough time, and my heart goes out to the people that are suffering through this. And sometimes it's nice to put a face to it, though, you know, because quite often we live in our little bubbles and we don't understand that, you know, these are real people with nice, cute little families that are working their heads off, and something terrible like this happens and they can't find employment anymore. So it's really real, I think, for a lot of people, and important to understand that this isn't, it's not just some weird subset of people that don't have any interest in working,
Yeah,
you
these
know.
are our families, our friends, people that we interact with on a daily basis. If you go to the same coffee shop to get your favorite coffee, you're interacting oftentimes with a person that would be considered Alice, and you probably have a relationship with them. And so, and now we've certainly had the opportunity to meet lots of families that have been impacted by COVID-19 that we've been able to assist because of our Hospitality Cares Pandemic Response Fund. There are 4,800 families that we gave a $500 check to help them kind of get through. But these are folks that look just like us. I mean, they're all genders, races, etc. They're hardworking Louisiana families that, to your point, through no fault of their own, lost their job. And while obviously there's lots of discussions around the why and the managing of pandemics and those kind of things, we were just left with the harsh reality that tens of thousands of our families were left struggling. And so it was our job to step up. But these are people that we know. And so I think that if people take anything away from the Alice report, I think that's probably one of the most important things, is that these are families, these are people that and for many of us, we were Alice at one point in our life. So it's not as if we're lost in the fact that there were months when I was first got married where we were struggling. These individuals are in that position and need a support system. And so these are
Yeah.
people we know.
Absolutely. I mean, I think of myself even right out of college as a CPA, brand new CPA. I mean, it was hard to make ends meet living
Yep.
in my own apartment by myself. I could make ends meet, but it was hard to get new clothes and stuff like
Yeah.
that,
Yeah.
and it was expensive. So, how can people access the Alice report?
So the easiest thing to do is to go to our website at unitedwayscla.org and just go to the main page, because all the information is right there. The links are available to the Alice report, et cetera, and lots of other information around not just the Alice report, but then how you can get involved in things that we're doing and our plan, our blueprint for prosperity, and our investment guide for how we're deploying the resources that we get, every year from our generous communities. And so the easiest thing is to go to unitedwayscla.org.
Awesome. So, when they go there, what kind of opportunities will they see about how to get engaged to help stabilize Alice households?
Yeah, I would say, a gift to United Way goes a long way. I think one of the things I like to point out is for every gift that we receive, we produce about $5.36 in community impact. So you make $1 gift to United Way, we leverage it 5 times over. And so a gift to United Way is helpful, but also take a look at our public policy agenda and see if there's something that you find that you have a passion for, and join us in that fight. You know, we give voice to the voiceless. And then if you can volunteer, roll up your sleeves. Many folks always don't have like discretionary income to give, maybe not as much as others, but you can get out and volunteer and just in general connect. And then beyond that, help a neighbor, help a friend, be kind and considerate, spread love, and, just be good to people. I think that's at the heart of it all. And I mean, we're in Louisiana, Julie, so this is like this is like embedded in the nature of Louisiana citizens, that just helping one another. And so I would encourage people to just spread the love.
Well, I love that message. That's a perfect place to end today. That is about all the time we have. I could talk to you for a long time, though. I'd like to thank you, Michael Williamson, for being our guest today. And for all of you that are listening, I hope you'll be able to join us for our symposiums taking place on January 8th on the state budget, February 5th on workforce and economy, which will include Michael Williamson, and February 11th on infrastructure. All 3 of those events you're able to register online right now for all 3 as one big event. We will be joined by all of the Videocast guests that you've seen over the last few weeks. You can visit our website for more details and to purchase tickets at www.ellevatela.org, and that's Ellevate with 2 L's, ELLEVATE.LA.org. If you're interested in joining Ellevate Louisiana, you can also visit our website there, and I'll say it one more time, EllevateLA.org with 2 L's. You may also listen to Engage interviews on all platforms where you find your podcasts and on YouTube. Finally, don't forget to like Ellevate Louisiana on all your social media platforms, and please share this videocast on your page if you found it interesting. I'm your host, Julie Stokes, and we'll see you next time.